Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network's BRN Sunday podcast. I'm Jeff Snyder, your host, and I'm going to be joined by members of academia, financial services, and the media as we analyze all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more. We've got another great show for you this week, so sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast. Let's kick off the show with a look at technology. Joining me on the line, he's Senior Technology Consumer Products Reporter with The Motley Fool. He is Daniel Klein. Hey, Dan, welcome back to the program.
Oh, hey there, Jeff. We live in a magical age of technology at the moment.
Well, yeah, magical age of technology, if I can figure out how to use it sometimes. But, I think we're all challenged. I was talking to my father earlier, and look, I think these big organizations that spend lots of money on technology, things still get bound up in bureaucracy. So I'm very happy that we have technology. I just have to figure out how to use it better. But anyway, how are you?
I am good, as good as can be expected given the bizarre times we're living in right now.
The times, they are bizarre, and they are changing every moment, every hour, every day. But Dan, let's talk. Let's try to change the tone and tenor a little bit. I know you wanted to talk about two things that really piqued your interest this week. I think Apple dumping Intel,
Yeah.
and the Segway retiring one of its options. So you start.
Yeah, so let's talk about Apple and Intel. Apple has been slowly making more of its own chips, and it was kind of a matter of time before it said, we're going to just use our own chips for everything we do. It's not a huge percentage of Intel's business, somewhere between 3 and 5%, but it's an interesting development for Apple customers. It's one of those scenarios where they can do a better job because they understand everything else that's going into your new Mac, your new iPad, your new iPhone, and we should see better performance. I know that I buy a new MacBook almost every year, and the improvement is noticeable. There's supposed to be a leap when they slowly transition into their own chips, and I'm excited about that. Apple has never let me down with a product, so the more they take in-house, they have the expertise. They have the people to do this. This isn't a death blow for Intel. I mean, you don't want to lose a customer that's 3 or 4% of your business, but it's still, they'll be just fine. But Apple doing this is good news for Apple customers. It's also kind of the biggest thing that came out of their virtual worldwide developers conference. Usually this is a time period where they make a lot of new introductions, and not a ton happened this year, probably because they don't really know what the timing is for new devices. I'm not sure you want to necessarily release, new headphones or new Apple TV in the upcoming holiday season, which might be very, very muted.
Yeah. So what does this mean? I understand what it means for new products, but what is the overarching theme here in terms of what this means for Apple products longer term? They're creating their own chips. They're bringing it in-house. Is it that they're going to have a much better product than they would by using someone else's chips? Because remember, when they first started, I think they were using they were using a Motorola chip, right? Weren't they using a Motorola chip back in the 70s, right? And
I think that might be true, but that's before my time. What it
nice.
does is,
Thanks for dating me, Dan.
sorry, well, you're only a couple years older than me.
I know.
When
Dating us. Okay,
when
sorry.
when they control the entire supply chain, one, they're not paying a markup. Intel has to make some money on those chips. So obviously there's startup costs. There's money Apple has to put into developing their own line of chips, but they can build a chip that's perfectly aligned with their devices. And that's something that it's a lot easier if the chip guy can walk down to talk to the screen guy. I know nobody can talk to anybody right now, but eventually, all the Apple team making all these products will be in the same building. It's a lot easier to have that be sort of in alignment than when it's people from other companies as part of it.
Okay, well that seems to make sense. I mean, I agree with you. I think Apple's products by and large amazing, a little costly, Dan, but you get good results with your iPhone. You get good support. I don't use a MacBook laptop, but from all accounts, and I know you're a big MacBook user, seems like, and a lot of creative people use it, right? I mean, it is like the go-to product for creatives out there. a lot of people are happy. So people are really want to pay the premium, or will pay the premium um, for that better product.
Yeah, you get what you pay for. My 16-inch MacBook is lightning fast. It's relatively lightweight. It has a crystal clear screen. My 12-inch MacBook from, I want to say, 2017 is still better than any PC I own, and I do own a somewhat high end, maybe a $700 or $800 lightweight PC that my son uses. So, look, do I think you pay a premium? Yeah, I'm holding up my iPhone here. I pay extra money, probably $400 or $500 more than I would for a comparable Android phone. But the ease of use is amazing. The camera is great. Not that I necessarily need that. I'm not sure if the pictures of my cats I take and the occasional
Oh,
picture of my son need to be in 10 billion pixels or whatever it is. But that said, it's there if I ever need it. And nothing ever breaks. My Mac never crashes. My PCs crash all the time. There's much less of a virus fear on a Mac. And some of that is there's less Macs, so there's less incentive for hackers. But some of it is they are more secure. Updating, everything is just easier. And that's a real positive.
yeah, absolutely. I've not used Macs, but I would, I'm surprised that you say that there are fewer of them. And I understand that there are a lot of people that use Windows, but every time I turn around, Dan, if I go into, well, when I would go into a Starbucks, or I saw people with MacBooks. I mean, everyone I know likes the simplicity of a MacBook. So I'm just surprised that the numbers are there, but maybe this app, the IBM compatibles just have the lead, and it's insurmountable at this point.
I love that you just said IBM compatible. But this is
You
one
know
of
what I
those.
mean? You know what
Yeah,
look, I'm old school. I dated myself at the beginning of the segment. Come on.
so I think the amount of people working in a Starbucks probably way over indexes on a Mac or a Microsoft Surface.
Okay.
That's a very portable crowd. But if you go into most offices, I would say people are using PCs simply because, my wife just got promoted and she got a new Dell laptop, and it's very nice. It's thin. It's got a great profile, but it was probably $600-700. Whereas an entry level Mac, which would be smaller than what she'd want for a screen, is $1,100. So there's a logical reason why her nonprofit isn't going to give her that. At Motley Fool, we have an option. You can have a basic Mac or a basic ThinkPad as an entry-level employee, and as you move up, your options get bigger and more choices, and you actually get to keep your old computer. But I don't think that many companies do that, because pretty much a comparable Mac to a comparable PC, you're going to save about a third on the
Hmm.
PC.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's going to be interesting, interesting to interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how what this change means. Not outsourcing chips. Will there be some savings there? Will there be much more efficient delivery of technology? I think that's going to be absolutely fantastic to see. I'm looking forward to it. Dan, let's shift gears. Talk a little bit about Segway. We know Segways. I know Segways. Police officers and mall cops, right? The movie Mall Cop, running around with the Segway. We've seen police officers use them as well. What can you tell us about the Segway?
Yeah, it's done. So here,
Thanks. There at the end of the segment. We'll talk to you later, Dan.
no,
No, I'm just
no.
kidding.
Here's the problem with the Segway. When the Segway came out, it was about $5,000. So it was only affordable for those uses, for cops. I'm sorry, police officers. Is that cops is actually generally not considered a proper term. So for
Sure.
police officers, um, for tours, we have a Segway tour here in West Palm Beach. For maybe the security guy at a school, very industrial uses. They're used to get around warehouses, in very large warehouses. They never became mass market enough for the price to fall. I know that you and I might buy a $300 Segway. We're not going to buy a $5,000 Segway, because for $5,000 you could buy a car, and like a pretty decent car, given how depressed used car prices are. But what's really killing the Segway is the electric scooter. So Jeff, I don't know if you've ever been on an electric scooter, but
No.
I own one.
Okay.
Bought one for my son in Orlando,
Do tell.
and it was about $300. And admittedly, I had to shop around to find one at that price. I'd say the going rate is closer to $400-500 for a quality one. But it can carry me, and I'm a bigger person than my son. It has two modes, one that lets it go up to 4 miles an hour, one that lets it go somewhere close to 17 miles an hour, which is terrifying. And it has a
Wow.
charge that lasts for a few hours. if you go to downtown Orlando, like the tourist district, there are pickup rental scooters that are very heavy duty, big platform to stand on. All you have to do is swipe your credit card. That's true in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm sure it's true in lots of other cities I haven't been to. It's coming here in West Palm Beach. We have a few of them. That technology is easy and cheap and accessible. So whether it's a mass rollout of them or a business saying, yep, we want a scooter-like device for people to get around our warehouse, it kind of makes the segue not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a bit of a trick to riding a Segway. So you might see scooters that have more of a platform that aren't that sort of like small bar you stand on. Some of the ones you could rent for short-term use are wider than the traditional ones. But as cool as the Segway is, it really is just a transportation device. And if a scooter can do it on average for 10% of the price, well, there's not a lot of reason to make Segways anymore.
Okay, I understand that. So it really comes down to usability, and I always when I saw the Segway, I would always see like YouTube videos of people crashing the Segways. They had become very popular, crashing into other people. In fact, I saw one that where someone crashed a Segway into Usain Bolt after he had just finished a heat. I don't know if you saw that.
I
So
I
go ahead.
have. There's a significant learning curve in using a Segway.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
While there are significant dangers in using a scooter, please, folks, wear a helmet. It's pretty easy to understand how to use it. Now, that said, nobody tells you what happens when you hit uneven pavement or your first speed bump. It can be quite terrifying. And I'll say, my son has a couple of abrasions that have come from tooling around on his scooter.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the ones that are available for tourists have much lower top speeds. There are some better safety features put in. Certainly, if you're using it in a business use, you can regulate the speed, you can mandate a helmet, that type of thing. The Segway is better, but it's like if I told you, hey, Jeff, for $10,000, you can fly first class
Hmm.
New York to Las Vegas, and you'll have all this stuff. It'll be really comfortable. We'll get you a drink, there'll be a massage. Or for $500, you could sit in a nice comfy seat and not have all that stuff. I think most people, that's the direction they're going in.
Yeah, I don't need a lot of bells and whistles. I just need to get from point A to B. The 500 option is kind of where I sit. And look, if it's more functional, this is just a case of something that had a purpose, was kind of outlived its usefulness, and now it's being replaced by something that is much more useful to people, right? That's just the nature of production and productivity and manufacturing, right? That's just business.
It's just how it works,
That's
unfortunately.
well, fortunately, they can put it in the Smithsonian. I'm sure they'll put a Smithsonian in the Smithsonian right next to the space shuttle. Will be the Segway. Maybe
Yeah, I think that's very likely.
there it is.
It's a historic item. It's just no longer necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Went to I it's put in my minutes. It's the Segways go the way of the dodo. And if you don't know what the dodo bird is, folks, look it up. Well, Dan, always a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to having more time with you. I probably spend more time with you than maybe your wife, and we spend more time together. We're always talking, but I'm looking forward to having you back on the network very soon on Tuesday. We'll talk more about technology.
I'll see you later.
Bye-bye. Welcome back. Now we're going to take a look at the latest social media news when it comes to retirement, financial planning, geez, everything. And who better to do that? He is the Senior Financial Services Editor for LinkedIn. He's also the editor of the This Week in Finance newsletter, Devin Banerjee. Hey, Devin, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jeff. How are you?
Do you ever get tired? I'm well. Do you ever get tired of doing double duty on Fridays? You're on the network in the morning. And then you got to come back and do the podcast. Does that ever do you ever feel taxed?
One, I would say I really enjoyed talking with you, Jeff. We've known each other for a while now. But two, a lot of my work and the work of my team at LinkedIn is to continually monitor, what's going on and what's trending among finance professionals on the platform. So all the work's pretty much done. I'm just sort of distilling it for you.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's amazing. I think more people, when you look at these platforms, right, I'm surprised that there's not more analysis. Not speaking at a church, right, or at a school, but like these other platforms, social media platforms, why they wouldn't do more analysis. I love the fact that you all are looking at this. We talked earlier today on the network about the workforce survey that you all are doing. That's amazing stuff, and I think more and more people would like to learn a lot about what's trending and why it's trending. But that's just me. Who am I?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and we're using a lot of our own original data. As you just mentioned, we got about 700 million people on the platform, so we can see what they're doing and if they're changing jobs, if they're moving around the country or the world,
Yeah.
and what they care about. And yeah, we can also see what people want to read. And so the first item I'm going to bring you today, and we're recording this Friday morning.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, what people really care about this morning is the rolling back of reopenings of certain economies around the U.S., especially Texas today. So this is a day after pausing its reopening yesterday. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is now rolling back outright some of those reopening stages. So this is coming, amid a surging of new cases of coronavirus. Texas is the second most populous state, and it's now ordering bars, restaurants to shut again.
Jeez.
Or actually, I should say bars to shut completely, restaurants to operate at half capacity.
Sure.
And as I said, a surge in cases, nationwide. We actually saw a record on Thursday of newly confirmed cases. That was just south of 40,000. That's like 39,972 newly confirmed cases.
Wow.
And 4 states are accounting for almost half of those cases, including Texas. Also in that data, about coronavirus cases that is worth noting is that young people are starting to make up a greater percentage of new cases. So this, of course, raises concern that, that reopening of bars and offices in other parts of the country could fuel contagion there. I should also note the White House has also reconvened its coronavirus task force that had not met for about 2 months. That it's unclear why, but that has been reconvened as well. So not great signs, And I should say this comes in a week when, as you and I discussed on the network, we got some economic indicators and updates that were also not pretty. So on Wednesday, the International Monetary Fund significantly downgraded its outlook for the global economy. As we talked about, it's projecting, a deeper recession, a slower recovery than it itself had just forecast 2 months ago. So it's now looking globally at about a 4.9% contraction for 2020, and that's versus just a 3% contraction it was expecting 2 months ago. So kind of a Debbie Downer of a week, to be honest.
Yeah, well, look, and it's not like we didn't expect a rebound we've been told that this, and we haven't even really reached the second wave, but I think it just underscores the importance, forgetting the economic impact, the importance of masking, practicing social distancing, doing the things we're being told to do until, or even through, we get a vaccine. Devin, I have to believe with spikes in other parts of the country, South Carolina, Florida, those governors and government officials may also be looking at curbing some of the reopening. And I have to think, given what we talked about today, this morning on the network, what you're reporting on LinkedIn, what we're seeing, this is just going to be more of the same in terms of we're just unable to really project where things are going to go in the short term or in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really putting, economists, market watchers on edge. They are, very focused right now on the government assistance, so fiscal and monetary policy continuing. They're very worried that if that dries up or if politics gets in the way of that, things could head south quite quickly again. They're also concerned about consumer spending, shrinking and that demand shock continuing. Concerned about major industries like airlines, leisure, hospitality, travel, restaurants, retail facing a protracted slump. Mm-hmm. Another concern of theirs that we highlighted this week that I think, the media and maybe we in society don't talk about enough is the fiscal cliff for cities, states, and municipalities. Tax revenue, other sources of government income have really collapsed. Mm-hmm. That raises the prospect of, massive service cuts, job losses. I was doing some research in Michigan. they've instituted a work share plan where 2 out of 3 state employees are partially furloughed. In your neck of the woods in New Jersey, the government has moved about 100,000 state workers to abbreviated schedules. So, of course, hitting their incomes. Public schools across the country are shedding positions in greater volumes than during the Great Recession. So, there are so many ripple effects, just so many ripple effects going on.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
no, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to add, our LinkedIn data has shown some interesting trends though, and just some bright spots, because I know that always helps during my segment. But we have seen, of course, coming off of a low base, we have seen a nice increase in people's outlooks for their jobs, careers, their personal finances among freelancers, contractors, and the self-employed.
Uh-huh.
As I said, at an absolute level, not a high level of confidence, and this jump is coming off of a low base, but we are seeing that segment really increase in confidence over the past couple months. In large part, we think because employers, medium-sized companies, big companies are seeking those type of workers out for projects and assignments rather than, adding full-time employees to the payroll right now as the economic recovery remains fragile.
And I guess it's a double-edged sword, right, Devin? You would want people to be hired full-time, obviously for the long term, but this is kind of falls into the trend that you and I have been talking about, which is, and a lot of us have been talking about, which is move to a gig economy. So you're not just doing one thing. And it sounds like this could force people who are among the unemployed to potentially become more gig workers and maybe not return to full-time work in the same way that they were working before.
Right. Certainly. I mean, the gig economy was just swelling and booming before this, and then it took a huge hit. Freelancers actually were the most down on their outlooks in, I think, March and April when we ran our workforce confidence index. So I think now in this quote-unquote new normal, as you said, Jeff, maybe companies will hand out more of these opportunities for gig workers. So certainly a bright spot there.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more to come on this. And again, like everything else, I think we're all just kind of ebbing and flowing. I feel like we're on a boat on an ocean, and it's kind of this, depending on the waves. Sometimes the waves kind of, are not as high, and then other times we get these really volatile high waves and knock us around a little bit. So I think we're all kind of adapting. And
That's true.
And it's changing in real time, and you gotta, we have to kind of roll with the punches. But I think it's even harder when you're kind of on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, and we have to kind of keep our eyes out for those folks. And that's why stimulus and continuing some of the CARES Act provisions probably going to be important to talk about during the summer while Congress is meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of us watching, the economy, the investment environment, the financial industry, it's just week by week. It's a roller coaster, as you say. I mean, the data, especially around the labor market and the economy for, just ordinary folks in this country, some weeks, there are more bright spots than dark spots, and some weeks there are more, dark spots than bright spots. And that's why I try to distill, all the data, economic indicators, et cetera, coming out each week for you guys.
Very interesting. Well, Devin, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you again for doing double duty. Thanks for the insight. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Sounds good, Jeff. Take care.
Bye-bye. Welcome back. Now we're going to talk a little personal finance. Joining me on the line, she's a personal finance reporter with The Motley Fool. She is Mari Backman. Mari, great to have you back on the program. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here.
Happy to chat with you. How's everything going in quarantine?
Well, this is week 1 of Camp Mom, and so far we're just plowing through. There's been a little bit of boredom, not on my part, on the kids' part, but, everybody's coping.
Yeah, well, that's good. I know so many people are challenged right now, especially parents. As I always say, parents have had a really rough go of it, having to, take care of kids, take care of the home, and all that kind of stuff, and double for teachers. So kudos to you and other parents out there. So let's jump right in. There's a lot going on. I think you wanted to talk about stimulus. So
Stimulus, yes.
let's
Yes,
stimulate us.
the big buzzword.
Yep.
So earlier in the week, President Trump actually stated that he does expect to see some sort of follow-up stimulus or relief package passed. And what that exactly means, we don't know. We don't know yet. We probably will know more in July, but we don't know right now. But I thought maybe we'd talk through a few of the options that have been floated in recent weeks or months.
Yeah.
So first, we've got the HEROES Act. So the HEROES Act was introduced by Democrats. Basically, it calls for extended unemployment. It calls for a second round of stimulus payments, and that's something that a lot of people want to hear. A lot of people who already got the initial $1,200 stimulus payment have already blown through it. And so the HEROES Act is actually calling for a second round of payments. Mm-hmm. Same thing. It would be $1,200 at a max per person, only where the HEROES Act differs from the first round of stimulus payments that went out under the CARES Act is that the HEROES Act allows for $1,200 per child also, up to a maximum of 3 children per household. So basically under the HEROES Act, some families would be looking at a $6,000 check.
Wow.
Which is huge.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So that's obviously something that people are kind of holding out for. But unfortunately, the HEROES Act is highly unlikely to go anywhere. It stalled in the Senate, and Republicans have made it pretty clear that they oppose to the act. They think it's too expensive. Some of the relief it calls for, lawmakers are arguing that it's not needed, what with the economy opening back up. So I wouldn't bank too heavily on the HEROES Act, but what I will say is that it might serve as a basis for maybe some sort of bipartisan act that maybe doesn't call for the same level of relief or the same level of stimulus payments, but I think there's at least some solid footing in there that we might see carried through to a different proposal.
Well, that seems, look, it has to start somewhere, so maybe this is like, here, this is everything that we want. Obviously the two houses of Congress need to work together to create a bill, right? And that takes a lot of conversation back and forth, give and take, compromise. That's the key word there. Clearly, from my perspective at least, something is needed. I mean, we have people that are still unemployed. I mean, how many millions of people that are unemployed? I think unemployment just went up another 1 million to 1.5 million this week, didn't it?
Yeah, we're seeing jobless claims again, in the upward of, 1 million mark. So, yeah, definitely not looking good. Definitely need some more money going out there. Although what's interesting is that, so another proposal, Jeff, that's being floated around is, so this one's a clunker, okay? It's the Reopening America by Supporting Workers and Small Businesses Act of 2020. Now I'm done with that. Okay. Yes, that's the name of the proposal, and that also calls for a $1,200 payment, not a stimulus payment. Though it's interesting, Jeff. So that actually, the purpose of that act is basically to reward people who return to a job with like a one-time, either a one-time $1,200 payment, or I've heard them say that it might be 2 separate payments of $600. But the point is basically to incentivize people to stop collecting unemployment and go back, if you have the opportunity to go back to work, go back and take that job. The reason some people aren't doing that is because at least through the end of July, there are a lot of people who are making more money on unemployment than they did at their former jobs because of the $600 weekly federal boost that's in play until July 31st. That boost was part of the CARES Act that went into effect back in March. So people on unemployment right now may actually, financially speaking, be faring better than they were prior. So the purpose of this, what we can call it a reemployment stimulus, if you will, the purpose of this is to get people back into the workforce. And obviously, Jeff, that money is not going to be, applicable to everyone, because there are people who maybe they're still working or they don't have an offer on the table. They don't have a job to go back to. So it's an idea, but it's one that, obviously is not going to hit as many people.
Yeah, I'm definitely hearing diametrically opposed philosophies here, which is not, I guess, unexpected. And I guess just the comment you made about the $600 being more rewarding than working. I'm like, in my head, as you were saying that, I'm like, well, who thought of this, right? I mean, I understand that it's not a perfect science, but who actually thought of this? Like, you want to disincentivize people? Okay, well, give them more than when they were working. That's not a good
Right. I
thing.
mean, I think it was well intended because, under the CARES Act, basically the CARES Act was passed late in March. And when did the COVID-19 threat really emerge? I mean, I don't think anyone woke up till about mid-March. That's when stay-at-home orders and school closures and stuff like that first even just started to pop up, at least here in my neck of the woods. So
Hmm.
I think lawmakers, to be fair, actually acted pretty quickly and said, okay, clearly, like, people are starting to lose jobs by the millions. We need to pump some relief into this economy. Let's do this. And so, ideally, what they would have done is the purpose of the $600 weekly boost was to basically make workers whole, right?
Yep.
Was to say, okay, well, under normal circumstances, your unemployment benefits for the week basically replace maybe at most 50% of your former paycheck. So by giving this boost, we want to basically make sure that people are not really losing income, or we want to minimize the extent to which income is being lost. So it was a good idea in theory, and I think a valid one in theory. Unfortunately, what they didn't have time to do was actually kind of vet each individual recipient and say,
Oh yeah.
okay, well, the $600 boost, I mean, you're entitled to that up to the extent that it replaces your paycheck, but you can't earn more on unemployment. That's something that a lot of people have criticized. Why are people earning more on unemployment? And unfortunately, they just didn't have the manpower to kind of stop that from happening. So it was like either give everybody on unemployment this boost or don't. So they went for the, give everyone the money approach, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. But yes, as a result, you've had people who have been demotivated or disincentivized to go back to a
Yeah.
job because
Yeah.
it basically means earning less money. On the other hand, Jeff, though, let's not forget that that boost actually does expire on July 31st, and we don't know if it'll be extended. So that may not be an issue come August.
Well, let me say this. I think Congress needs to get back to work. I'm just going to put it out there, whether you're a Republican or Democrat. We have got obviously spiking cases. I'm hearing or reading that Governor Greg Abbott, for example, is not going to move to the next phase because there's a spike in Texas. You look around the country, that's going to have an impact economically on opening. So something clearly needs to be done. It'd be good to get the lawmakers kind of working on whatever this next step is. The other thing, that's just my personal opinion, does not reflect anyone else on the program or the show in general, just Jeff Snyder's opinion. And then also just want to make sure I say caveat that and save everyone else the blowback that could come. And then the other thing, Mari, I'm really interested. Actually, tomorrow on BRN AM, we're going to have Betsy Mayotte, who is the founder and president of the Institute for Student Loan Advisors. We're going to talk about student loans because, as you know, the CARES Act included a lot of aspects around student loan forgiveness, or at least in the short term. I'm really interested there because there's $1.6 trillion of student loan debt that's out there, and a great part of that is federal debt. So it's going to be really
Right.
interesting to see how lawmakers deal with that, deal with what you're describing, et cetera.
Right. It'll also be interesting to see if a follow-up relief or stimulus package, if students are actually, considered in that relief,
Yep.
if students are eligible for some more relief. Jeff, if you've got one more minute, there's one
Of
more
course.
proposal
For
in the
you,
works
I've
that
got
I'd
two.
like to.
I've got 2 minutes for you.
So this is an interesting one. So it sort of was introduced around the same time as these different relief programs, and I don't think it's fair to call this a relief program, but it's actually a tax credit called the Explore America tax credit. So basically, what it would do is it would allow Americans to claim up to 50% of their domestic travel costs between now and the end of 2021, up to a maximum of $8,000 in costs or a $4,000 credit. So a tax credit reduces your tax liability on a dollar-for-dollar basis. That could be very valuable. But the part of that I'm having trouble with is, at a time when so many people are struggling financially and barely have the money to put food on the table, I mean, who's traveling? Like who's racking up $8,000 in travel expenses, in the next few months? I mean, we're certainly not. And especially when you kind of take a look at what's going on in the country now, and you see all these different hotspots emerging and these surges of cases, it's like, do we really want to be encouraging Americans to travel all over the country right now? So I just wanted to mention it because it is out there, and it is being talked about in the context of stimulus and relief packages, but I think it's going to be a hard sell.
It sounds like that one was written by the lobbyists for the cruise line, hotel, and airline industry and other like tourism bureaus around the country. Look, I tend to agree. I mean, I can tell you I am personally not going anywhere. My wife actually just left to take a walk, but that's about as far as we're going to go. We're not looking to go anywhere. So I guess we're going to see. It's going to be an interesting summer for a lot of reasons. As you mentioned at the top of the segment, families, the camps, what to do with children. I think that's a big deal. And then you've got these other economic issues that are going to be important to resolve as well. Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting 8 to 10 weeks. It's going to be even more interesting in the fall as parents grapple with, the new reality of sending kids to school or not. And, that's something everyone's also waiting to hear an update about. At least here in New Jersey, we don't really have any guidance yet. Hopefully there'll be some soon.
Well, absolutely. And don't forget, we got the crazy season coming up. We've got presidential, congressional, and senatorial elections plus local elections. It's only going to be crazy. So I guess more to come. Maury, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for the excellent information. Really makes it easier for us in the audience to understand what's happening. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
All right, Jeff. You too. Bye.
Welcome back. Now we're going to shift gears, talk about markets. And on the line, Oliver Rennick is the lead anchor for the TD Ameritrade Network. Oliver, how are you?
Doing well, Jeff. Thank you.
Always a pleasure seeing you and watching you on the TD Ameritrade Network. Lots going on this week, I would assume, as all other weeks, I guess. It's just one of these things where there's ups and downs and different twists and turns. What's going on in the markets this week?
It has been twisting, turning, and basically going nowhere. It has been a really interesting environment to see how hugely volatile 2020 is now calming down. But that's just kind of on the surface. There still is quite a bit of turmoil happening on a sector level, and I'm largely of the belief that there is still too much at stake for the market to be passive for long. So that to me means that depending on how the virus part 2 or part 1.5, whatever you want to call the continuation of the spread in certain parts of the state, whatever you want to call that, I think that there is a potential for big moves probably pretty close ahead. Now, I think the market has given us good reason to believe that the bias to those moves is probably still higher. But as we've seen, there is quite a good deal now under threat from the virus once again in terms of the reopening potential that this economy had a month ago. So there's definitely some realization happening that this is going to be a bumpy road. But is it a road that goes off a cliff? That still does not seem to be the most logical conclusion. So that is now really the question people are grappling with is how big are these bumps? Is there still a cliff? And how do we make sure we don't go over that?
I got to figure, Oliver, that you've got people on both sides, or maybe you have people on 3 sides, right? You got people on the more bearish, the people on the bulls, and the people that are going to ride the fence and just a little, just right. But you've had a lot of people as guests on your shows this week. Any themes anything that you're hearing that leads you into one direction or the other?
Well, I think that right now, for the most part, people are still trying to kind of chase the rally that they missed. A lot of professional investors and institutional investors really only started getting bullish in, let's call it, late May as the S&P broke out to 3,000. So there still is a pretty hopeful tone out there. I think that we know how to contain the virus. If we need to clamp back down. So that still is preventing to some degree a deep, deep downside scenario. But apart from that, it is, it kind of switches pretty deeply. The other side is super, 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 super bearish.
Yeah.
That's where I think that it's hard to envision a market plateauing and going sideways here. There's just too much at stake, and that generally leads itself to pretty big moves when an asset has a lot at stake and goes sideways. When it does pick a direction, it can be pretty big. That was the case I made back in May after the market had been range bound for about a month. The case seemed to be that it was going to break the upside. It did that. Now it's kind of range bound again, and it's a little bit harder to tell at this point which way it should break. It really depends on just how out of control the latest flare-up in the virus turns out to be.
Yeah, I feel like this just changes day to day, hour to hour. You know, we had an announcement today as we're talking from Greg Abbott, reclosing or changing what's happening in Texas. It looks like this could happen around the country. Real quick, Oliver, you know, we talk a lot about equities, but what about bonds? What are you seeing in the bond market?
Well, that one has been, I just had a pretty long call with a really smart guy about this subject. Basically, the simplest way to put it is Fed's pinning rates for the foreseeable future. Bonds aren't going to move as a result. That is widely accepted. It remains the most consensus view on Wall Street that there's no point in trying to play the bond market really in either direction because it can't sell off too fast, and Jay Powell's not going to do anything with interest rates. I have a little bit of a different view on that, which is that prior to coronavirus, just watching the charts and watching the trends, it seemed pretty clear that the bond market was ready to sell off and reflect growth potential in the United States. So that basically all got put on hold. But there's some logic into thinking that maybe it's just been kind of pushed down, beach ball held underwater, waiting to come back up again. But right now, it's just most investors are viewing it as a kind of facile, just quiet, silent market. But it is worth noting the bonds have not had the same momentum as they used to. Even on down days in the market, it's just not getting the bid that they used to. So it seems like that trade for now is just very quiet.
I have to imagine, Oliver, that you and the team at TD Ameritrade are getting a lot of questions. You have a humongous base of investors that use the platform. I have to think that there are lots of questions that go to the representatives, the investor teams, the people that are doing education. Any thoughts about that? Any plans for future town halls? And the last two, very successful, very well attended. Seems like people, especially in the TDA platform, very hungry for as much information as can be provided. They're willing to sit through 4 hours of great content to hear the latest news.
They absolutely are hungry. They've done really well for the most part from the data we can see over the last couple months since the market bottomed out. But the question is kind of how do you handle those games if you're still sitting on them, which many people are, even after the latest volatility. So we're going to talk a little bit about that actually on Monday with JJ and some of the team. We're going to discuss that a little bit on our show. But it's definitely a tricky environment. People are in a good place for the most part after being on the right side of the trade the last couple months. So we'll talk a little bit about that on Monday. But we'll probably do another town hall at some point. It definitely has been really helpful.
Absolutely. And people can certainly check out your show. I think it's https://tdanetwork.com. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? I didn't even have to look at anything. I just knew that from the top of my head because I watch
TDAmeritradenetwork.com.
Oh, darn, excuse me. I watch the network every day, so I kind of know it by heart what to put in. Anyway, Oliver Rennick, always a pleasure. Go get back at him. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, bye-bye. Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears, talk a little real estate and also a little travel. And who better to do that for us or with us than Jacob Passy? He is travel and real estate reporter for MarketWatch. Hey, Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Great to talk with you. I know that You are in Maine, and I heard it is beautiful this time of year. And can you confirm that?
Yeah. Yes, it is gorgeous. Maine is best in the summer, worst in the winter.
Well, that seems to make sense. So let's jump right in. Let's. I don't know which topic you want to talk first, whether it's travel or mortgage, but you lead us
Um,
off.
yeah, so we'll hop into travel. So, as frequent listeners probably know, I covered Disney quite a bit on my travel beat, and two pieces of theme park news came out this week. The first one being that Disneyland in California was originally supposed to reopen in the middle of July, so next month. But they have put the reopening on hold indefinitely. It was, kind of in response to governmental pressure. Basically, I think that the governor of California had not approved the theme park's reopening plan
Hmm.
yet. And with the massive surge in cases that we're seeing in, California and many other states, that, you know, basically scuttled the plans in Disneyland. Disney World supposedly is still on track to reopen next month. The theme parks are set to start reopening on the 11th, and I believe some hotels have already started allowing visitors again in that area. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I mention all this to say that, if you have travel plans coming up, in the next couple months for the, southern part of the U.S., you might want to come up with a backup plan in case that all falls through. Florida just saw a record number of cases yesterday. I think it
Hmm.
was around 9,000 new cases in one day, which is quite high. So, all these developments are, very contingent on, what goes on with the coronavirus.
And so, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is a work in progress, as we like to say in the business, and I think no one knows what to expect. And it seems like a good, smart move to kind of delay the reopening of Walt Disney Land. I'm sure that it's going to disappoint a lot of youngsters. But look, you got to do what you got to do to keep people safe. Just in terms of refunds, the first thing I'm thinking about, if they cancel my plans or something happens, I may have to look for refunds or getting a credit, right? Right, Jacob. I mean, these are type
Yeah,
and my travel
so
and my travel plans too.
So Disney's been pretty forthright with offering refunds, to my knowledge. They also, I think, offer discounts if you choose to rebook your travel to later,
Hmm.
to next year in particular. Something to keep in mind also with Disney World is the NBA is set to be, finishing up their season there, and the players are going to be staying in the hotels and things like that,
Right.
which doesn't mean that you're going to see the players. The players are actually under very strict orders to, not socialize, not, go out into public spaces, et cetera. So a lot of the multiple hotels in the Walt Disney World complex are going to be reserved for the NBA, for its players, coaches, managers, reporters, etc.
Hmm.
And if you actually are booking a stay or have a stay booked for coming months, there's actually a disclaimer on the website that you actually have to opt into keeping your reservation right now, and then on top of that, they make a note that where you're currently booked to stay may have to change, and if that's the case, because I think so many people are canceling their travel plans right now, there is a lot of flexibility. So I know that Disney has been able to move people to other resorts from the ones they originally booked at because of where the NBA is currently set to stay. But when it comes to other things like flights, right now most airlines are still not offering refunds. They're offering vouchers or credits, which are good for a year usually. But a lot of folks may not want to travel for the next year. We still don't know if there will be a second wave. There's a lot still up in the air. So that will be kind of interesting to see if that changes. I think there's a lot of pressure from lawmakers on airlines to change that. The problem for airlines is there's very few people flying right now. So those vouchers are basically kind of a way for them to hold on to your money, and not, kind of go bankrupt themselves. So they don't want to do away with that model. And another thing to keep in mind is that, even if you have a travel insurance policy,
Hmm.
it may not cover, protect you as much as you think. If you bought your travel insurance after the coronavirus pandemic started, it could technically be considered an event that you could have foreseen. So, if you bought a normal policy, it may not, apply to cancellations caused by the coronavirus or, the government restrictions and things like that. Similarly, if you bought a cancel for any reason policy, which is a more expensive version of a travel insurance policy, there are even limits there. Like, let's say you decide not to go and you contact your airline and you get a voucher from them. They've got a policy where they'll give you a voucher if you cancel your flight because of, coronavirus concerns. Well, you won't get that money back then from the travel insurer. You're stuck with the voucher. So, you want to be careful if you have canceled for any reason travel insurance to not, basically, do things that will prohibit you from actually getting the payout that you're owed from your insurance policy.
Yeah, lots to keep track of there, Jacob. Why don't we switch gears and talk a little real estate now, because I know lots.
Yes.
We talked about mortgage rates, I think, last week, but there's a lot going on. Places are reopening. People are able to go now in some cities, be able to see properties if they choose to, instead of doing virtual. But what can you tell us? What are some changes in the real estate industry?
Yeah, so two reports came out this week that, had interesting findings, existing home sales and new home sales for May. So, most real estate data reports that we get are lagged by a month. And they seemingly on the surface tell two different stories that don't seem to make any sense. But when you actually dig into the weirdness of these separate reports, it actually is the same story, which is a positive one for the real estate industry as of now. So the existing home sales figure for May dropped considerably, whereas the new home sales figure for May had a big rebound. And the reason for that difference is not because people are preferring new homes to existing homes or anything like that. It's because of how the data is, how the reports capture, when a sale happens. So the existing home sales report comes from the National Association of Realtors, and their determination of an existing sale is based on when the sale actually closes. So it's like the last step in the process, basically. The new home sales report comes from the Census Bureau, so it's a government report, and they capture sales when the contract is signed. So that's actually like a month or two before the sale closes in most cases. And so the reason these two reports, even though on the surface they say different things, are actually kind of saying the same thing is because the existing home sales report for May, since it's capturing closing, is really a reflection of what happened in March and April. So obviously when the coronavirus was ramping up, the outbreak was ramping up in the U.S., home sales activity drew to a screeching halt as, businesses were shutting down, realtors were figuring out how to do virtual listings and virtual tours and all of that. And, folks were figuring out, how do you sign, for the title and this and that in a virtual setting. Only certain states allow for e-signings. It's not national. So, people were figuring that all out. So it makes sense that May's existing home sales figure was down. The new home sales figure was up in May, which also makes sense. That's when a lot of the country started to reopen. And as a result, folks were, there was a lot of pent-up demand for home sales. I think we've spoken before, the job losses caused by the coronavirus were largely in the service sector and lower wage jobs that aren't necessarily the types of jobs people hold when they are looking to buy a home. You're more likely to be a renter in those cases. And so, some of the economic downturn, didn't impact folks who are in the home buying population, which is good for the real estate industry. Sales rebounded, and we continue to see that. But there's a big question mark forming right now about the surges we're seeing in a lot of states, and especially in the Sun Belt, which is some of the most popular real estate markets in the country are located there. Arizona, California, Florida. These are really big states for real estate, and the massive surges we are seeing there. I think today both Florida and Texas rolled back some of the reopenings they had allowed, and are putting more restrictions back in place. And if we continue to see that happen, while that might not affect real estate directly, because in most states it's considered an essential activity that can continue on, even if there's a pretty strict shutdown of businesses, it will still weigh on people's confidence, in the economy. The longer these closures continue on for, and the longer the pandemic continues on for, the more it'll have an effect on attitudes about buying homes. The more likely that there could be depression or a more extensive recession. I think a lot of folks are seeing the rebound right now and enjoying it, but it's no guarantee that it will continue. And Zillow even put out, a forecast where they're now expecting that home prices will actually dip in the latter half of the year, because they're thinking that there's going to be kind of a delayed reaction in the housing market to everything we're seeing right now in the job market. So kind of interesting to look at these different reports, what they show us, and kind of how they really, as much as they can show us what's going on right now, they can't really tell us what's going to happen in the future. That will remain a question mark for quite some time.
Yeah, look, I mean, just like the travel industry, a lot changing day to day with real estate. Jacob, I mean, it's just we just have to keep checking in, and I don't think anyone knows where this is all going.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Jacob, always a pleasure chatting with you. I'm going to let you get back to that beautiful, lovely Maine outdoor. You have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Talk soon. Take care.
Bye-bye. Welcome back, and now we're going to talk a little market/cryptocurrency. Joining me on the line, he's the co-founder of Delphi Digital, Mr. Kevin Kelly. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Doing well, Jeff. How about yourself?
Doing well. Obviously disappointed with some of the economic news we've been getting this week, and some of the tea leaves that economists are reading, and also disappointed with some of the spikes in coronavirus cases. But otherwise, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think there's a lot of kind of pent up anxiety that's starting to play out in the markets here.
Yeah. Well, I want to, before we get to crypto, we had Oliver Rennick on in the segment prior to yours, but I want to get your sense of the markets, what you're seeing, what your thoughts are, and then we can go directly into crypto.
Yeah, no, I think, again, you mentioned you've seen this recent spike in this, I don't even know if you can call it a second wave, but I guess just an extension of this first wave. We started to see a rejuvenation, I guess you'd say, in COVID cases. And what's interesting is if you look outside of New York, where I've been for the last 4 months since this really started, New York's actually handling it quite well, especially New York City. But you're starting to see cases really start to pop up further out west, Texas, Arizona, places like that. And so I think obviously part of that has fed into the market's reaction this week. I think today we're down another 1% or so. We had a pretty tough last couple days. Yep. I think a lot of that again is just getting the market's starting to get price in. I think a lot of things that we've been talking about for a while, which is, you have a lot of this disconnect between the haves and the have-nots, and you have the Fed backstop, basically supporting the corporate credit market. And now you're starting to see, with this increase in cases, people getting more anxious or nervous about potentially rolling back some of these reopening plans, which again is going to hit consumer spending. The other thing is you have a lot of these different programs that were set up and put in place specifically around, unemployment benefits here in the U.S. that are set to expire at the end of July, barring some type of proposal or approval of a new economic stimulus bill from Congress, right? So I think people right now, there is uncertainty. There are ways in which, I guess you could say the party can keep going, but I think people are starting to look out even further and say, what does the market and what do companies in the outlook for the equity market, what does that look like, post-COVID, even if things do start to renormalize? And to be honest, we're still facing a number of different headwinds that, make me not necessarily as, I guess, say bullish on equities, at least in the short to intermediate term.
Yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking, I think, for people. We thought we were kind of out of it. We had gotten back to 27.5 when it comes to the 27,500 when it comes to the market. Now things are taking a little bit of a tumult. We've got closures. Obviously, people who are just riding the wave, they want to sell their home, they want to buy a home, they want to do other things, they want to get out. Definitely challenged. Kevin, let's shift and talk a little about crypto, because it's been an interesting week in cryptocurrency as well. But how does cryptocurrency kind of play in and react to what's happening in the markets this week?
Yeah, what's really interesting actually is this week in particular, I should say the last, really 2 weeks in particular, have been a bit of a disconnect within, I would say, the broader crypto market outside of Bitcoin and the rest of the equity market. When you look at Bitcoin, you track that, correlation against the S&P recently. I mean, they've moved in very much so in tandem, right? And we've talked for a number of reasons why that is. But when you look outside of Bitcoin, there's actually been some really interesting activity that's gone on, and a lot of really strong outperformance in some of these alternative crypto assets. Because one of the things that's, I could say, a very popular hot topic within crypto right now is this idea of, without getting too complicated, basically creating these decentralized liquidity pools. And so what you've basically seen is, long story short, these new kind of token issuance methods and processes come to market within the crypto space over the last couple of weeks, and a lot of these projects that have issued tokens, some of which were pre-existing companies that are now tacking on a token or integrating a token into their kind of business model. We're starting to see how that new kind of token issuance model can play out in real time. Mm-hmm. And so we're doing a lot of work on this. Anybody obviously who's interested, feel free to reach out to me. Would love to hop on the horn and explain more. But, kind of the broader picture is there's a lot of really interesting innovation that's going on, especially recently within the crypto space. And it's actually given, a large part of the alternative crypto assets outperformance over Bitcoin, especially in the last couple of weeks here. It's kind of, I think, really rejuvenated some of the enthusiasm, for the space.
So, Kevin, how does the general public get access to crypto? So one of the things I think we have talked about is trying to get a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency ETF. If I want access, but I don't want to, maybe I don't have the $10,000 or whatever it is to buy a Bitcoin. I don't even know what it is running at. But how can I get access to Bitcoin without selling my house in order to buy that?
Well, it's a really, really good point that you bring up, because one of the common misconceptions too is that you have to buy a single Bitcoin, right? Because if you're talking about stocks, that's how typically your ownership works, right? If you want to buy a share of Amazon, you can't necessarily buy a fractional ownership. You have to buy a full share, which I think right now is $2,700 per share. Wow. Within Bitcoin breaks down into a very, very kind of small decimal level. So you can buy, if you wanted to buy $10 worth of Bitcoin right now, you could do that. You don't necessarily have to buy a full Bitcoin, which I think is really important, because as you start to see market fluctuations, even my own personal account, for example, when I see big dips in Bitcoin's price, or I think it's an attractive entry point, I'll go in, maybe I'll buy a quarter of a Bitcoin or half a Bitcoin or a tenth of a Bitcoin, right? You don't necessarily have to buy the full thing. If you're looking for the kind of really basic, easy access to your kind of top largest crypto assets, like your Bitcoins and your ETHs, which is a native asset of Ethereum, I mean, a Coinbase account, especially for people here in the US, is probably one of the easiest ways to do it. They've got, you can do it right online, right on your desktop. You can just log on, create an account. Basically links up to your bank account, and you can buy crypto instantly right on there. And then they also have an accompanying mobile wallet that you can use as well if you want that kind of enhanced security around actually holding and securing this. They have options as well. So it's a lot easier, I think, than a lot of people think. And you don't have to necessarily, sell your house or even, take out a second mortgage to buy Bitcoin at this point. You can buy literally, as much or as little as you would like.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I guess I misunderstood. There may be people out there who are listening to this. Are we any closer to getting like a Bitcoin or crypto ETF, or is that still a ways off because of the SEC approval process?
I think it's still a ways off, but it's. I think it's becoming less and less of a uh, necessary catalyst, I guess you could say, because there are a number of different ways in which people can get access to this. There's products that are coming out that are launching now that are specifically even designed for financial advisors. If you have an account with a financial advisor and you want to get exposure to Bitcoin, there are products in which financial advisors can actually get access to that in a compliant way and can track performance and all of that. So it's starting to get integrated in with your classical portfolio management strategies. So an ETF, yes, would broaden, I think, or accelerate, the adoption or the investment potential of Bitcoin, because obviously it opens you up to an entirely new class of potential buyers, right? But I think as time goes on and these new products develop, and people honestly just start to get more comfortable with some of the innovation that's happening and the ways in which they're making it easier. People are making it easier to buy crypto and get access to Bitcoin. I just think it's not going to be as big of a price catalyst as we imagined, even 12 months ago.
Interesting. It's certainly it's certainly a dynamic, and we often talk about institutional investors. Really interesting to hear how those of us who are just retail investors might find our way to using digital assets, because as we've proven out, at least in our conversations and through this crisis, that they have been very popular as portfolio diversifiers, and may, want to underscore the word may, be something for people to consider. Kevin, always a pleasure chatting with you. Really appreciate your perspective on both the markets and crypto. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeff. You too. Have a good one.
Welcome back. Now we're going to close out the show as we always do with a conversation with the Legal Eagles. Joining me on the line, David Levine, Kevin Walsh. Both are principals with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, how are you this week?
We are good, Jeff. Thanks for having us. Kevin's excited. I'm really mellow and tired, so it's just good to be here, and I can't wait to hear Kevin talk.
All right, Kevin, take it away, my friend. Thank you, David.
Well, it sounds like some of us are doing better than others, and the others of us can brighten David's day by talking a little bit here.
Oh.
Kevin, any day with you is brightening my day.
Oh,
but
geez.
alas, it's just been such a busy week because of key governance items. What is that? What is there to talk about, Kevin?
Well, I thought maybe you'd been too social this week, David. I thought that was the issue.
But it's the environment I'm living in, and that explains why.
So you may have picked up on it. We just hit on environmental, social, and governance. And this was a big week in terms of environmental, social, governance regulation, as the kind of the acronym is thrown around is. And ESG investing has been a topic of interest for retirement plan fiduciaries, I don't know, at least 20 years now. And it's an area where it's been a whole lot of sub-regulatory guidance. So kind of just publicly released one-page letters that don't go through notice and comment, and they get posted to DOL's website. And essentially, you have different guidance depending on if it's a Republican president or a Democrat president, although the words stay pretty close to the same. So under a Democrat administration, you have been allowed to take ESG factors into account, so long as everything else is equal. So all things being equal, if you want to take ESG factors into account, go ahead. In a Republican administration, the guidance is, you're allowed to take ESG factors into account only if all other factors are equal. Now, to my ears, they sound very similar, but when you look at the guidance, it's clear that, the Democrat guidance has been designed to say to plan fiduciaries, a lot of the time these things could be equal. If it's a close call and you want to say tie goes to the ESG factor, go ahead. In Republican administrations, it's been more of a microscope saying, if you think it's a close call at first base, you better go to the video replay system and get your call right. Well, this administration's been very focused on moving guidance away from sub-regulatory guidance and putting it through kind of the formal rulemaking process. So on Tuesday night, the Department of Labor released a public copy of its soon-to-be-published proposal on planned ESG investing. And, if you knew the party of the White House, it's not surprising. The proposal is fairly stringent in terms of limiting the ability of plan fiduciaries to consider ESG factors, it comes out and says, if you're taking non-pecuniary factors into account, and it says suggests that ESG factors are frequently non-pecuniary factors, that you had better make sure that all things are very, very equal. Mm-hmm. And the department suggests that it's not really aware of many cases where things have been equal. The big thing also is they're adding a record-keeping requirement if you pick the ESG option. Mm-hmm. So even if things are equal, it seems like there's a thumb on the scale of if you pick this option, you've got this additional burden of record-keeping. It's going to be interesting to see as this proposal moves forward, what comes of it. I know we've talked in the past about, there are cases to be made that a lot of these factors could be economic. So to the extent it's economic, that you think the companies that stay away from certain behavior will perform better in the long run, you still may be able to use those, but the key will be evaluating as an economic factor as opposed to evaluating as a social good. David, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of debate right now, and you said it, how do you know if anything is truly equal? I think one of the big takeaways from this is it introduces, and there's lots of different views about this, a process, especially for ESG-related items, whether it's in a defined benefit plan or separately for 401k plans, that really says, here's steps and documentation we want you to see if you're going down this road. There have been a number of people who've made comments already about this, raising the question of, well, we have process requirements here, but why is it necessary here? And there's different views about that. And I think that you're likely to see a wide range of opinions come out of people, and not from necessarily the normal quarters that you would expect, where one group's in favor and one group against as we go forward. I think you're going to see a lot of back and forth on this for the simple reason that we all live with the constant specter of things like litigation. And some people think, and I think we all agree, a process is great, but what proper process should be is a big deal. And I think people are thinking, okay, for the ESG it means this. Well, what are other people going to say about other areas? And we know the plaintiffs are always picking on us. So I think some people think this works, and I think some people are going to really say, I have some real questions. So we'll have to see with the comments. I know we have a lot of clients who are interested in this.
Yeah, I think.
So, David, do you think we'll see process plaintiffs once we have pooled employer plans?
Your alliteration is brilliant, Kevin, and when you're getting me in a nice, peaceful, calm mood, I do not have the wit or just skills to keep up with your geeky benefits rapping. So therefore, I will say in a sarcastic way today.
Caustic.
Yes, caustic is a good word. I think we will find out, but I definitely think some people are going to have some real questions and concerns. I get where the DOL is coming from, but I think you hit it best out of the box. The key thing here is really this is going to be a spin to economic and codifying it into regulations rather than having it be the back and forth, or as a bunch of us say, ping pong guidance that we've had over the years.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how this thing plays out. This is a very hot topic in general in the investing world, so it'll be interesting to see how it gets applied to retirement plans. Gentlemen, always a pleasure chatting with you. Love the insight. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you all very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it entertaining and enlightening and informational as well. We're back again tomorrow for BRN AM. Our guest tomorrow is going to be Betsy Mayotte. She's the founder and president for the Institute of Student Loan Advisors. We'll be talking about student loan forgiveness, and the potential for the extension of the CARES Act. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.